Jerry, what is this proclamation about?
Well, CHCP is very proud to have been the leading organization that helped initiate the city of San Jose to give a resolution of apology to the Chinese communities for past discriminative actions that they have indulged in against the Chinese communities way back from the 1850s up to the present. And I add that San Jose became the second city in the United States to issue a resolution of apology, but since then 4 other cities have now followed suit. So we're very proud that the CHCP was the one that helped initiate the interests of this in San Jose.
So right now, maybe we'll have Jerry walk us along this wall. It has a timeline, of United States, San Jose, and China.
Yes, when we opened the museum, we said, how can we tell visitors what were the things that happened within the first 100 years after Chinese immigrated to America? So we started with 1850s when the first Chinese came, up to 1950, what was happening in the United States, what was happening in San Jose, what was happening in China. China, they were having wars and droughts. San Jose was just developing. They had 5 Chinatowns that started because the people were in the farming industry. In the United States, there was a lot of discrimination, but California became a state in 1850, and then we went on to the 1870s, showed examples of, in the United States, the discrimination, cartoons against the Chinese. In San Jose, we showed that the Chinatowns had been burned down by people that did not want the Chinese here. But in 1888, the last Chinatown was established, called Heinleinville, by a man who gave us the property so that we could have one, and he built a wall around the town to keep it safe. And then we continue on to the 1900s, where the Chinese were starting to build industries like the farming industry, and China was going through World War I, World War II, lots of wars going on at that time. And what was happening in the United States, of course, with the wars, and of course, the Exclusion Act was during this time where the United States did not want Chinese to come into this country. And then we had many war efforts and showed up to 1950. And then we ran out of space, of course, so we decided to go into technology and to show what Chinese have contributed. So just like the children always like to look for Jeremy Lin. Jeremy Lin, in 2010, he's a San Jose native, and he was a sports star.
He's from Palo Alto,
yeah. And then we showed where Norman Mineta, a San Jose native, became a congressman and then Secretary of Commerce, and had an airport named after him. And then we've had many people. So we tried to show the next 100 years, we hope to show other contributions that Chinese Americans have made to this country.
Well, Jerry, you really give us a detailed lesson about the history of early Chinese immigrant. Arthur and Jerry, welcome to Great Family, and thank you for your time.
Thank you for coming.
So first we will start with Jerry. I know you're the co-founder of Chinese Historical and Cultural Project. So what made you have this idea? And this project also helped to rebuild the ancient Gong here, and which is a museum now. So could you please tell us a little bit about the background?
We were very lucky back in the 1980s. The city of San Jose was excavating a garage for the Fairmont Hotel they were building in downtown San Jose, and they found many artifacts of the first Chinatown was established in the 1850s. Okay, so then what did the city want to do with these pieces that they found? So they contacted some of our Chinese leaders in the city, and Lillian Gongai and I said, well, we need to build a museum to put these things in. And so that's how it started. We said, how do we build a museum? Where do we get the money? How are we going to do it? What is going to be a form of it? And we formed a group of leaders in San Jose at that time. And within 4 years, in 1991, we opened this museum of Chinese American history.
So then in 1991, congratulations, so finally we have this museum. And I heard your father was kind of involved in the project as well, right?
Well, it's kind of deja vu because back in the 1947 to be exact, the city wanted to tear down this building because the people had not been able to pay the taxes. So my father, being the only English-speaking leader at that time in San Jose, was asked to go before the city council of San Jose, and he did, and asked for a reprieve. He said, if you could give this community 3 years and we can see if we can raise the money to reconstruct this building. Unfortunately, we moved away, and so while we were gone, the building was torn down by the city of San Jose because the last Chinatown had been torn down by then.
So Arthur, I know you're the board member, so what made you interested in joining the board?
Well, my brother and I were Silicon Valley entrepreneurs, and we co-founded our own company, a digital health company leveraging AI. And a couple of years ago, CHCP decided to honor my brother and I with an innovation award. And that was my first exposure to CHCP and learning about it. And as I got to know many members of CHCP, I found out that we had actually crossed paths many years earlier when Jerry had founded a scholarship, and I was in high school, and they gave me, I was one of the first scholarship winners of their scholarship, and that's when I had first met Jerry years ago in high school. And then even further back, the other co-founder of CHCP, Lillian Gong, and her husband, who was Dr. Ernest Gong, he was actually the doctor that delivered me when I was when I was born. So we had many overlaps,
yeah.
And so it was just natural for me to join the board and really contribute to CHCP and the mission of the organization.
So from the in Gong, the history of the early San Jose Chinatown, to nowadays we have anti-Asian hate almost every day, not just the past few years, but it's been happening, still going on. So do you think history repeats itself? Or we start with Jerry?
Well, I think that our role with CHCP is to try to help the campaign against anti-Asian hate, because our main goal for the last 10 years has been to bring in field trips of school children, the next generation, to tell them the proud history and contributions that the Chinese have made to the history of California. And so maybe with those backgrounds of history, they will appreciate what the Chinese have done to the county, the state, and the nation. And maybe that will help curb some of this anti-Asian hate.
So not just for Chinese students, but for students from all backgrounds to understand the Chinese culture.
Right.
as well.
So we have had over thousands of school children come into our museum to learn about the proud history of the Chinese who had to fight and struggle against discrimination. And yet, what did they achieve? We showed many ways that they have achieved and contributed to the history of the state.
So Arthur, I know you joined the board is because of the anti-Asian hate movement, right?
Well, yes, and we're familiar with the saying, if we don't learn from history, we're bound to repeat it. And when I came into the organization and learned about the 5 Chinatowns that were destroyed here in San Jose throughout history, I had no idea that that had happened. And I think the museum here and its mission to preserve, educate, and promote Chinese American stories is a really critical aspect of helping to be a bridge of understanding so that we don't repeat history going forward. And so I was really pleased to be able to join and contribute to this mission, because I know there's so many contributions of the AAPI community in this valley and in this region that have really created it to where it is today. My father was one of the first, if not the first, hires of IBM down here in the South Bay, and that led the way for others to be hired. My mother was the first baptism of one of the largest Christian faiths in the United States here, and she came over to the States here. Lots of contributions of the AAPI and the Chinese community to Silicon Valley region, Santa Clara Valley region, and we want to preserve those stories. That's part of our mission. So we have an oral history project that we've launched, and lots of people are doing oral history these days, but we want to preserve and promote the oral histories of those who built up our region here locally and share that so that we build those bridges of understanding going forward and we can all progress together and be more unified as a community.
Maybe one day the oral history will become a documentary.
Oh, we need a cameraman.
Yep. So talk about anti-Asian hate. Have you ever heard any story? I mean, not just back to the history, but in recent years, have you ever heard any story or have you ever encountered any discrimination?
When I first moved here back in the 80s, we tried to rent an apartment. And of course, I'm a fourth generation Chinese American, so I have no accent. And of course, right away they said, oh yes, there's one available. So we came to get it. And when they opened the door, the lady looked at me and she said, were you the one I talked to on the phone? I said, yes. She says, oh, I'm sorry, we rented it already. Oh. So that was my first feeling of being discriminated against here in Silicon Valley.
So how did you feel at that moment?
I was ashamed and I felt bad for my children to hear that, because we know that she said it was vacant. In fact, what we did is after we went back, just to prove that there was discrimination, I called again and disguised my voice and said, is this apartment still available? And she said, yes. So it just showed there is discrimination in this world. And I wanted to educate my children on that so they knew what to face.
So Arthur, did you have any experience of being discriminated?
Well, you know, I heard of experiences, and my parents tried to shield me from their experiences, so I was really shielded, but I did notice things as I was growing up, going through school, and sometimes you know, it felt like working twice as hard and being twice as good for the same level of recognition as everyone else, and even in scholarship or even college applications where I knew I had better grades, more leadership, more activities, and significance of leadership, and yet others would be getting accepted, you know, before me or into different universities. So it was interesting time period, and I've noticed that throughout the years.
So which school did you try to apply?
Oh, I better not say. But I eventually got the schools that I wanted, so that was a good thing for me.
That's good. So I know, Jerry, you have another story to share, right?
In the 1960s, when we were ready to buy a home, there were many homes available. There were all-track homes by different builders. And I would go to various ones in Saratoga, Cupertino, Los Altos, and although they would have a map showing the available houses, whenever I would point to one, they'd say, oh, that one's already taken. And so I found out through research that there were only 3 builders at that time that were actually selling to the Chinese. And one I have to really give compliments and recognition to is Mr. Joseph Eichler of the Eichler Homes, which are very well respected in the industry, but he would rent to Chinese and sell to Chinese.
Well, that's very good. So that's very few people willing to do that. So from history to nowadays, and so I know the museum play a really significant role. So what you plan to do in the future to further educate the public?
We try to have many cultural festivals, events, speaker events, promote Chinese authors, Chinese entertainers, Chinese playwrights, and we try to bring the community into all of these activities so they can see that Chinese are still contributing many things to the culture of America here.
And we're also upgrading the museum continually and leveraging technology to bring it into the next century and extend our influence and allow people to experience what we have here in the museum in a wider basis. So we're leveraging technology and extending ourselves out.
So you're going to be using AI in the future? Have a live tour?
Well, we're AR, VR, all kinds of things that are important now for the experience of the museum.
Very good.